Hey everyone, welcome back. So here's something that's honestly hard to believe. If the government shutdown continues much longer, food stamp benefits could actually stop for the first time in modern history. That means millions of families, seniors, and even children who depend on that help every month might suddenly have nothing. We're talking about 42 million Americans, many of whom already live paycheck to paycheck, now facing empty grocery carts because of politics. And what's more, the states, not Washington, are suddenly being asked to step in and pick up the slack. But can they really? Before we get into all that, let me know in the comments, how would a delay or cut to food assistance impact people you know? Or maybe your local community? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. So, let's start with what's actually going on. Right now, the federal government has been shut down for more than 4 weeks. What began as a budget fight in Washington has turned into something much bigger, a crisis that's reaching right into America's kitchens. SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, what most people just call food stamps, is at the center of it. It's a program that's been around for decades, quietly helping 1 in 8 Americans put food on the table. For most families, it's not a luxury, it's survival. You see, usually, SNAP keeps running no matter what's going on politically. But this time, the Department of Agriculture says it doesn't have the legal ability or funds to keep payments going. They've basically said the well has run dry. That means when November 1st comes around, benefits won't go out. And that's left millions of people scared, confused, and honestly angry. Now, it's easy to look at numbers. 42 million people, $8 billion a month. But behind those numbers are real families. One mom, for example, needs a special baby formula that costs around $50 a can. Without those benefits, she doesn't know how she'll pay for it. And she's not alone. Across the country, families are suddenly realizing that their grocery budget, something they counted on every single month, could just vanish. You see, SNAP was created back in the Great Depression as a way to help farmers sell crops and keep struggling families fed. Then it became a permanent part of federal law in the 1960s under President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty. The whole idea was simple. No American should go hungry because of circumstances beyond their control. So the fact that we're even talking about benefits stopping shows how serious this shutdown has become. Now, here's something people don't always realize. SNAP isn't just a safety net for individuals, it's also a huge part of local economies. Every dollar in food stamps creates about $1.50 in economic activity. So if that stops, it's not just families that get hurt, it's grocery stores, farmers, and small businesses too. Imagine rural towns where grocery stores already run on tight margins, suddenly losing hundreds of regular customers overnight. That's what's at stake here. So what are states doing about it? Well, many are trying to fill the gap, but it's like trying to plug a dam with a garden hose. California has already fast-tracked $80 million in aid and even sent National Guard troops to help food banks. Minnesota set aside about $4 million for emergency food shelves. Virginia declared a state of emergency and plans to use $37.5 million a week from its own surplus to help families. Even smaller states like New Hampshire and New Mexico are working with local food banks, trying to stretch what little they have. But here's the thing. SNAP pays out $8 billion every single month nationwide. So even if states put in tens of millions, it's just not enough to replace that federal funding. Food banks are already warning that they can't possibly meet the new demand. One director said, for every 1 meal food charities provide, SNAP provides 9. That really puts things into perspective. And what's making this even more complicated is that states are now getting dragged into lawsuits. Over 24 states, including Arizona, Massachusetts, and North Carolina, have sued the Trump administration for refusing to release SNAP funds. They're arguing that Congress made this funding permanent years ago, meaning it's supposed to continue even during a government shutdown. The USDA, though, says its contingency fund can only be used for natural disasters like hurricanes, not political standoffs. So yeah, it's turned into a legal fight and a moral one too. The administration says it's simply following the law and that using those funds without congressional approval could break budget rules. But critics say it's about priorities, that money is still flowing to certain areas, like defense and agriculture subsidies, while programs for low-income families are left hanging. It's a tough situation, and depending on who you ask, you'll get a very different answer about who's really at fault. Now, what's interesting here is how this all ties into bigger changes happening this year. You might remember the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed earlier in 2025. It added new work requirements for food assistance, meaning that many adults up to age 64 now have to work or volunteer at least 80 hours a month to keep their benefits. The administration said it's about promoting independence and responsibility, but critics warned it would make life harder for people who simply can't find steady work, especially in rural areas or for those caring for family members. So now, with the shutdown, you've got people who already face tighter rules suddenly being told that even if they qualify, their benefits may not come. And that's where frustration is really boiling over. You've got governors from both parties saying, "We'll do what we can," but even they admit that states can't replace the federal government's role in feeding millions. And there's another part of this people don't always think about: the emotional toll. I've heard from viewers before who say they're not on SNAP, but their parents or neighbors are, and they're scared too. It's the uncertainty that gets to you. Not knowing if next month you'll have food, or if you'll have to choose between groceries and gas. One woman said, "I don't know what it's going to take for Congress to listen to us little people." And that feeling that Washington doesn't hear you is spreading fast. What's more, this isn't just about hunger. SNAP helps stabilize families during hard times. Job losses, medical emergencies, inflation spikes. When it stops, everything gets harder. Kids go to school hungry. Seniors start skipping meals to stretch their benefits. And the health costs of that ripple out far beyond food, into hospitals, pharmacies, and community centers. Now, I know some people might say, well, states should take care of their own. And sure, some states are stepping up. But let's be real, not all states have the same resources. California can pull from a large budget, but what about places like Mississippi or West Virginia? In those areas, food banks are already stretched thin. West Virginia's governor even launched a donation drive and pledged $13 million in matching funds to help local food charities. That's great, but compared to the $80 to $90 million that SNAP provides in New Mexico each month, it barely makes a dent. And when you think about it, it's not just a policy issue, it's a test of values. The idea behind programs like SNAP isn't just about economics. It's about compassion, about saying that in America, no one should go hungry because of a political fight. That's why so many people are calling this more than a logistical failure. They're calling it a moral one. What makes this even more frustrating is that it didn't have to get this far. Some experts say the USDA could have used its contingency fund, while others argue Congress should have passed a temporary funding measure to keep SNAP going. But because neither side budged, regular people are caught in the middle. And, that's really the story of most shutdowns. Those with the least power feel it the most. And meanwhile, food banks are reporting record numbers. In Pittsburgh, calls to food assistance hotlines have doubled. In Philadelphia, lines wrap around buildings before they even open. And guess what? The benefits haven't even stopped yet. That's how scared people are. They're trying to prepare for something they've never had to face before. Economically, this could also hurt small towns. In Georgia, for example, SNAP brings in over $3 billion a year in spending. If that stops, grocery stores, farmers, and suppliers all take a hit. So it's not just families losing food, it's local economies losing lifelines. And honestly, once those small stores close, they rarely reopen. That's how food deserts grow. So then, what happens next? Well, if the shutdown ends soon, payments might resume. But experts say it could still take weeks to process everything. There's also talk that this might lead to broader reforms, or at least a rethinking of how critical programs are shielded during political fights. Some have even suggested automatic funding triggers for programs like SNAP to prevent this kind of situation from ever happening again. But until that happens, families are just waiting. They're refreshing their benefit cards, hoping something changes. And in the meantime, states, nonprofits, and neighbors are doing their best to help one another. It's one of those moments that really shows both the cracks and the compassion in our system. The cracks at the top, and the compassion at the ground level. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think should happen next? Should states take more responsibility, or should the federal government make sure programs like SNAP never stop, no matter what? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's something that affects all of us, directly or indirectly, because food security touches every part of our economy and our communities. And hey, if you found this helpful, or you just want to stay informed as things develop, make sure you're subscribed. I'll keep sharing updates as the story unfolds. Not just the numbers, but what they mean for real people like you and your family. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going, stay informed, and hopefully we'll see some leadership that puts people before politics soon.